Welcome to the Monday night strategic update for Promethean Action. Your usual hosts, Keisha Rogers and Michael Stager, are away this week. So Tony Pappert and I, Bruce Director, are going to be substituting. And there's a lot to go over and a lot to discuss. So I think we should just get started very quickly. I'm sure everybody's up on the news developments. And if you haven't caught up with the Promethean updates on the website and YouTube from Barbara Boyd and Susan Kokinda, I really recommend you do. Today, Barbara Boyd has an update which is really important, where she discusses some of the story behind a lot of the controversy around the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which is being debated in the Senate right now. And if you're a follower of X, you'll probably see a lot of hoopla, both for and against, and misrepresentations and everything about the Big Beautiful Bill. It's extremely important. Trump is really stressing that this has to get passed. There's a lot of things in it, compromises, which I'm sure some of us don't like, but there's a lot of things to like. And what's most importantly is that it gets passed so that we can proceed, Trump can proceed with the agenda to reorganize the U.S. economy, get rid of globalization, and begin to shift the U.S. back to a manufacturing and productive economy, which is what he was elected to do. And Trump has made the analogy, and so have we here at Promethean Action, to the current time and to the situation in 1932-33, when the Roosevelt took over the United States, was elected in a sweeping landslide, and then proceeded to try and undo the damage that the British had done to the world economy. And as today, there was a lot of opposition to what Roosevelt was doing, coming from both the left and the right. Today you have, on the one hand, the libertarians who want to cut all the spending and complaining that Trump isn't doing that enough. And then you have the Keynesians who are saying that Trump is cutting too much of the social safety net and so forth. And all these people miss the boat, because the real issue is shifting away from a money economy, financialized economy, to one that's based on production. Or as Lyndon LaRouche always used to say, the difference between a debt and a credit economy. So we could take up a lot of the details of that in the Q&A, and any other subjects you would like to discuss, including the aftermath of the situation in the Iran-Israeli war and the Middle East, and what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, and anything else you want in the Q&A. But Tony has a very important historical presentation tonight that really will set the context for how you can look at today's period, because what's going on today, you really won't understand it if you don't understand how we faced a similar, not exactly the same, but very similar situation in the period of the first Roosevelt administration. So, Tony, why don't you begin?
Sure enough. Thanks, Bruce. We have a midterm coming up, just about a year and a half, November 2026, and it's extremely important. Now, because it's the fate of, the Trump administration, the fate of the Trump administration's programs, and therefore the U.S. and therefore much of the world hangs on that midterm. Now, the papers tell you that the president's party almost always loses in the midterms. Now, if that's true, and if President Trump is going to lose these midterms, how is he going to continue his program? you see, as we'll discuss more in terms of the big, beautiful bill, you see how much trouble he has to get his program through now when he has control of both the Senate and the House of Representatives. How is that can be possible if he loses control of one or both in the midterms? In reality, I mean, if President Trump loses control of both houses in the midterms, he could well be impeached, as he was twice in his first term. But it isn't always true. And let's go back, as Bruce said, to 1934 and to the New York Times and their star reporter, Arthur Kroc, who the midterms were September 6th, 1934. And when the results came in, this New York Times article by Arthur Kroc was datelined September 8th, 1934. Tide sweeps nation. Democrats clinched 2/3 rule of the Senate. House lead increased. Seaboard states back the president as tide rises in West. Mandate for program. Curley, Democrat, easily wins in Massachusetts. Donahue beats Senator Fess in Ohio. Indiana in procession. Vandenberg, famous Republican, threatened with defeat in Michigan. Hyde Park for Roosevelt. Hyde Park was the town where Roosevelt lived. It was deep-dyed Republican. He had failed to carry it in his previous election. They voted with the Democrats in 1934. Kroc said, the president and his New Deal, in its first electoral test yesterday, won the most overwhelming victory in the history of American politics. The most overwhelming victory in the history of American politics. A record-breaking number of votes for an off-year election. Get that, very important. Gave this president a clear mandate to proceed with his policies in his own way, and in giving that mandate, they literally destroyed the right wing of the Republican Party. Again, the right wing, not the whole party. Pennsylvania, the citadel of republicanism since Lincoln, rejected for re-election Senator Reed, outstanding critical of the New Deal, and said to the Senate Joseph Guffey, who campaigned as the humble follower of God's inspired servant, his characterization of the president. Pennsylvania also chose a Democratic governor, constituting the most amazing turnover in the political history in this country. And the victory was specifically that of the president and his policies. I have more on this in a minute, but Kroc said the nation's voters increased the Democratic strength in the Senate from 60 to 70 or more, assuring 2/3 control, which is a record and has never happened before in an off year. Indications were that the Democrats will increase their preponderant lead of 309 in the House, as they did. I'll come back with that. By their vote yesterday, the people of the United States invested the president with the greatest power that has ever been given to a chief executive on the submission of his case. With that power went also the tremendous responsibility that accompanies large and unwieldy majorities. He goes through California, Upton Sinclair campaign, phalanx of New Deal states, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Indiana, Ohio, Rhode Island, Illinois, Missouri, Maryland, West Virginia, the Dakotas, Iowa, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, Washington, Colorado, and the South were mustered in solid phalanx for the New Deal. Joy in one camp, gloom in the other. Postmaster General Farley, who managed the Democratic campaign, reported that the president was overjoyed by the results. The Republican National Chairman, Henry P. Fletcher, sat in gloom in the party headquarters in Washington and issued no statements. Nothing was forthcoming from Herbert Hoover at Palo Alto, who in a letter published on election day pleaded with voters to send enough Republicans to Congress to form an opposition to save American institutions. So I think I'll stop there. Now, how is this possible? And as the article says, this was a great national referendum on President Roosevelt and his program. That's what it was. Roosevelt had not solved the Depression by any means, but what he had done gave people hope that the worst of what they'd seen in the Depression could be put behind them. And on the basis of that hope, he triumphed in, again, a nationwide referendum with record turnout record turnout for any off-year election ever, according to the Times. We have to bring about exactly the same thing in November of 2026. A national referendum on President Trump's program for good jobs, for peace in the world, for American manufacturing, a renaissance of American manufacturing, bringing with it low prices and high quality based on the revival of American manufacturing, low prices based on making things here, and the rest of his program. This has to sweep the country in a national referendum. We've got to achieve all those things. That in a nationwide move, we've got to achieve all those things that Roosevelt achieved in 1934. Record registration. Everybody has to be registered. We already know from the Post analysis that if more people had voted in November of 2024, Trump's majority would have been bigger. The same is even far more true in November of 2026. We have to register everybody. We have to bring everybody out to vote. This has to be a total outpouring of a national referendum in favor of President Trump and his program, just as in 1934, and we can achieve the same thing or more. Now, there's another aspect in which also we can achieve the same thing or greater that Roosevelt did in 1934. And that's the fact that the Democratic Party has got to distinguish itself into those foolish Democrats who will continue saying no, no, no to everything. We reject everything. We refuse to talk. We refuse to negotiate. That does nobody any good. Democrats have got to come forward, and it's beginning to happen now. Democrats have got to come forward who, rather than simply blindly rejecting everything from Trump, finds those things in his program which will help their constituents, like good jobs, for instance, and instead of saying no, 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 steps up to negotiate with President Trump and his party in the interests of their constituents, to negotiate these programs, to negotiate legislation, to behave as a patriotic and responsible opposition, which gives their constituents a voice in what happens in this country. Now with this Democrat blind refusal to talk or negotiate, President Trump determines everything unilaterally, in the most cases through executive orders, because the Democrats prevent all legislation through their blind obstructionism. How do they represent their constituents? Their constituents have no voice because they're refusing to talk, refusing to deal. That's got to end. Some will follow, blind opposition till the day they die. but many others can see the light, that there's reason to discuss and negotiate this program, thereby enhancing the unity of the country, the interests of their constituents, and the quality of legislation. If they, consent to deal in normal fashion with President Trump and his Republican. And this also, President Roosevelt's movement achieved in 1932 and especially in 1934. In his 1936 radio address, Roosevelt noted that 77 Republican congressmen, the lower house, Republican representatives, voted for the Social Security Act, 81 against. 15 Republican senators voted for the Social Security Act, 50 opposed. So in both houses, there were some who had the sense to negotiate the New Deal programs rather than simply rejecting everything outright. I mean, basically, one estimate is that 60 to 75% of representatives, lower house, supported some aspect of the New Deal, and 10% of senators. And basically, on the whole, that half of the Republicans were open to some form of pragmatic collaboration. We need the same thing today, and we will get it. We have to achieve it, and we will. Just to go back, and I omitted it earlier, but the overall results in the two houses in that 1934 midterm were that the Democrats gained 9 seats in the lower house and 9 seats in the Senate. So with the 9 seats they gained in the House of Representatives, their majority was 322 out of 425 total representatives. And with the 9 seats they gained in the Senate, they held 69 out of 94 senators, or over a 2/3 majority, as I say. So that is basically what I wanted to say to kick off discussion, that we have to, as you've heard from me, we have to achieve a huge outpouring and a nationwide referendum in November's midterm elections next year for President Trump's program. We have to achieve a mammoth outpouring of voters and votes, and win sane Democrats to a posture of patriotic partnership with the Republican MAGA majority in the interests of the country. So that's basically what I wanted to lay out for starters.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tony. Let me just, you should, if you want to get into the conversation, raise your hand, and we'll have a back and forth. Let me just add a couple of things, because I think this is really important, because in the media and the back and forth about the current state of political affairs, they're both, in the mainstream media, but also even within the MAGA movement, there's a lot of consternation about the direction the country's going, and in a certain sense of almost kind of fatalism that Trump, the MAGA movement have just a very short period of time to do something, and we need to we're hanging on for dear life to keep the country from going completely crazy. I think the recent election in New York is exemplary of that. A lot of the hysteria around what the meaning of that election is. But I think in the last 6 months since Trump took office, you've seen that he has defied the pundits and the predictions, even among some of his own supporters. And that's because there is a quality that Lyndon LaRouche talked about over and over again about the United States and about America and its role in the world. And that is the ability to do something that no other country in the world can do, which is to rise up at a time of crisis. And because of our history, because of our um, Constitution, and because of the character of our citizenry, under the right leadership, reassert our principles as we have in various times in our history. Um, just to add to the historical context that Tony presented, in the 1930s, every country in the world went fascist. Every country in Europe went fascist. The French were big supporters of fascism. Uh, The British royal family and all the British oligarchy, and including Winston Churchill, the great, who's now today revered as the great fighter for freedom, was a big supporter of Mussolini, and the British royal family supported the Nazis. Um, the king had to abdicate because of his support for Hitler. The Dutch, every European country, that you had the rise of the Japanese imperial state, which um, ended up, taking over most of Asia. Every Latin American country was riddled with fascism, and the United States itself as well. Roosevelt had opposition, both from the left, communists and uh, populists, who opposed the New Deal, who wanted a revolution in the United States, as well as right-wing fascists who wanted a Mussolini-style dictatorship, or even a Hitlerian-style economic policy, as well as the Roosevelts, who were, the Wall Street crowd that was pushing, um, the same thing that you hear today from the, establishment Wall Street Republicans of free trade and liberalization and so forth. And nevertheless, the American people rose up and chose a different path, which no other country did, and that's what saved the world. And that's the situation we're in right now. This is our responsibility. And it's very important that here at Promethean Action, we've dedicated ourselves to making sure that we're operating today and all through the rest of Trump's presidency from that standpoint of optimism and achievement, and not falling into the kind of pessimism and fatalism, which will certainly doom our uh, efforts here.
I
And
agree completely. Yeah. I mean, this Roosevelt victory in 34 was something that could only happen in America. It only as Bruce has said, it did only happen in America. It could only happen in America. It did only happen in America. And the result was to save the world from fascism. And today, again, America has come to because of our history, the Constitution, which is inside the bones of our people. Um, we've again come to the rescue. Globalism was killing not just the United States. Globalism was killing the world. The world was dying of globalism when Trump came to power in 2016, and when he came to power in 2024. The world was dying from globalism, and nobody could break the spell but the United States. And that unique characteristic we're going to show in the 26 midterms. As Bruce said, I couldn't agree more.
and every country, today it's the same thing, because every European country has caved to globalism, even though you have populist, anti-globalist movements, which are politically very strong. The AfD in Germany, the you know Brexit movement, and in the whatever Reform Party in Britain, the Marine Le Pen, the parties in Poland. Every country has a mass movement against globalism, but none of them can win. The only place that can win is in the United States. And we have a particular responsibility for that. LaRouche said, as Tony mentioned, it quoted it, that there's something embedded in the bones of Americans that enable us to be able to do something no one else can do. And we have our founding fathers in our history and to thank for that. But every generation that's faced with this kind of crisis has risen to the occasion in the past and is rising to the occasion right now. So we have a couple of questions. Why don't we open it up?